Subscribe to Infidelity Tales Lab. Now, let's begin. Dean Copeland pressed his palms against the kitchen counter, steadying himself as he watched his daughter Emma through the window. She sat cross-legged on the back porch, her 7-year-old fingers tracing patterns in the afternoon sunlight. The joy that had lit up her face just an hour ago, when she'd unwrapped her grandmother's gift, had vanished completely. The music box sat beside her, silent. Dean's wife Jennifer appeared in the doorway, her auburn hair pulled back in a hasty ponytail. Dark circles shadowed her eyes, the kind that came from too many sleepless nights and too many arguments. She still won't wind it? No. Dean turned to face her. She asked me why there's a hole in it. Jennifer's expression shifted from concern to confusion. A hole? It's handcrafted. Maybe it's not a manufacturing defect. Dean's voice came out harder than he intended. I need you to trust me on this. They'd been married for 9 years, and Jennifer had always been caught in the middle, between her mother Marcy Gillespie and her husband. Dean had tried, God knows he'd tried, to build a bridge with his mother-in-law. But Marcy had made her position clear from day one. Dean Copeland wasn't good enough for her daughter, and he never would be. He'd grown up in foster care, bouncing between homes until he aged out of the system at 18. No family, no connections, no trust fund. He'd put himself through community college while working nights at a warehouse, eventually building a small but successful carpentry business. He made custom furniture, the kind of pieces that lasted generations. Honest work with his hands. But to Marcy, he was just trailer trash who'd gotten lucky. Dean, please. Jennifer's voice cracked. It's her birthday. Can we not do this today? He wanted to tell her everything. The looks he'd been catching lately, the way Marcy had been showing up unannounced, the strange questions Emma had been asking about private conversations. But the exhaustion in Jennifer's eyes stopped him. She'd been dealing with her mother's criticism for years, and it had worn her down to nothing. I'm going to check on Emma, he said instead. His daughter looked up as he stepped onto the porch, her blue eyes, so much like his own, searching his face. Daddy, did I do something wrong? Dean's chest tightened. He crouched beside her, eye level. Why would you think that? Grandma Marcy said she made this special for me. But there's this weird hole and Emma's small fingers pointed to the base of the music box. It looks like someone's watching. The hair on Dean's neck stood up. He'd been telling himself he was paranoid, that years of dealing with Marcy's hostility had made him see threats where none existed. But Emma felt it too. He picked up the music box, turning it over in his hands. It was beautiful, cherry wood with inlaid mother of pearl, depicting a dancing couple. The kind of craftsmanship that cost serious money. The hole Emma had discovered was barely larger than a pencil eraser, drilled perfectly into the decorative base in a spot that would be hidden when the box sat on a shelf. Dean carried it into his workshop, Emma trailing behind him. His tools hung in perfect order on the pegboard, chisels, planes, sanders. He'd built this workshop himself, timber by timber, after they'd bought the house. It was his sanctuary, the place where everything made sense. He set the music box under his work lamp and retrieved his jeweler's loupe. Through the magnification, he could see it clearly, a tiny lens, almost invisible, embedded in the wood. His hands started shaking. Daddy. He forced himself to breathe, to keep his voice steady. Emma, sweetie, go get your mom. Right now. She ran without argument, sensing his urgency. Dean stared at the music box, his mind racing through possibilities, each one worse than the last. A hidden camera, in his daughter's bedroom, sent by his mother-in-law. Jennifer appeared with Emma. What's going on? Dean positioned the loupe for her. Look at that hole. Tell me what you see. She bent close, then jerked back as if stung. Oh my God, get Emma to Olivia's house. His voice was calm now, the kind of calm that came before a storm. Tell them it's an emergency. Don't explain why. Then come back. Dean, we need to call the police. We will. But first, I need to show you something. After Jennifer left with Emma, Dean went upstairs to his daughter's room. He'd built her bookshelf himself, each joint precise and perfect. The music box would have sat on the middle shelf, eye level with the bed. The camera would have captured everything. Emma's sleeping, changing clothes, playing. His rage was a physical thing, hot and sharp in his chest. But beneath it ran something colder, more calculating. Because this wasn't just about the music box. This was confirmation of something he'd suspected for months. He went to Emma's closet and ran his hands along the top shelf, behind her winter clothes. His fingers found it immediately. A small device, no bigger than a button, stuck to the wood with adhesive. Another camera. Then he checked the smoke detector. Modified. The night light Jennifer had insisted on keeping plugged in. Modified. By the time Jennifer returned, Dean had found 6 devices. 6 ways Marcy had been watching their daughter. Jennifer sank onto Emma's bed, her face ashen. Why would she? How did she? When was the last time your mother was here alone? Last week. I had that dentist appointment, and you were at the Morrison job. She offered to watch Emma for 2 hours. Jennifer's hands trembled. Dean, what is she trying to do? Build a case. The pieces were clicking together now. She's been documenting our lives, looking for anything she can use against us. Against you, Jennifer said quietly. She wants to prove you're unfit. She's wanted that since the beginning. Dean pulled out his phone, but Jennifer grabbed his wrist. Wait, if we call the police right now, they'll take all of this as evidence. We might not get it back. And what if there's more? What if she's been planning this for longer than we think? She was right. Dean had learned early in life that the system didn't always work the way it was supposed to. If they moved too fast, they might never know the full extent of Marcy's plans. 2 hours, he said. Give me 2 hours to figure out what we're really dealing with. Then we call the police. Jennifer nodded slowly. What do you need me to do? Call your mother. Tell her Emma loved the music box and wants to thank her. Act normal. While Jennifer made the call, Dean photographed every device from multiple angles. Then he carefully removed each one, handling them like the evidence they were. His carpentry work had taught him patience, precision, and how to see the details others missed. Those skills were about to become weapons. He laid the devices out on his workshop bench. 6 cameras, all professional grade, all transmitting to somewhere. But where? His phone buzzed. A text from Jennifer. She's coming over. So she has more gifts. She sounded excited. Dean felt a grim smile cross his face. Marcy thought she was winning. She thought she'd finally found a way to take Emma away from him, to prove to Jennifer that she'd been right all along about marrying beneath her station. She had no idea what she just walked into. Because Dean Copeland might have come from nothing, might not have had family or connections or a trust fund, but he'd learned something that Marcy never would. How to survive, how to fight, and how to protect the people he loved. When Marcy Gillespie's silver Mercedes pulled into the driveway 20 minutes later, Dean was ready. He'd spent his life being underestimated, being dismissed as not good enough. It was time to show his mother-in-law exactly what he was capable of. Marcy Gillespie swept into their home like she owned it, carrying 2 more wrapped boxes. At 63, she maintained the kind of appearance that required constant attention. Expertly colored blonde hair, designer clothes, manicured nails. Her late husband had left her comfortable, not wealthy, but she acted like aristocracy. Jennifer, darling. She air-kissed her daughter's cheeks. Where's my beautiful granddaughter? I brought her more presents. At a friend's house, Jennifer said, her voice tight. Dean wanted to talk to you about something. Marcy's smile didn't reach her eyes. Of course. What is it, Dean? He'd thought about this moment, played it out dozens of ways. The direct approach felt right. The music box you gave Emma. She found something interesting in it. It's a lovely piece, isn't it? I had it custom made. Yes, you did. Dean pulled out his phone, showing her a close-up photo of the hidden camera. Very custom. The color drained from Marcy's face, but she recovered quickly. I don't know what you're implying. I'm not implying anything. I'm stating a fact. You installed a camera in a music box you gave to a 7-year-old child. A camera that would have been positioned to record her in her bedroom. Jennifer made a small sound, something between a gasp and a sob. Marcy set down the boxes, her expression hardening. Jennifer, your husband is clearly having some kind of episode. This is exactly why I've been concerned. Mom, stop. Jennifer's voice was stronger than Dean had heard it in months. We found the others. In her closet, the smoke detector, the nightlight. 6 cameras total. That's absurd. I would never. You were alone in our house last week, Dean continued. 2 hours while Jennifer was at the dentist. That's when you installed most of them, wasn't it? Marcy's jaw tightened. If there are cameras, and I'm not admitting anything, perhaps someone else put them there. Have you considered that? Someone who might want to harm Emma. The implication hung in the air. Dean himself. That's sick, Jennifer said. Even for you, Mom, that's sick. I'm trying to protect my granddaughter. Marcy's composure cracked. Do you know what people say about him, Jennifer? Do you know what I found when I did some digging? He's got a sealed juvenile record. Sealed. That means he did something serious. Dean felt his hands curl into fists. He'd known this moment would come eventually. I stole food when I was 14. From a grocery store. Bread, peanut butter, crackers. Because I was starving and the foster family wasn't feeding me properly. The judge sealed it because I was a kid. Or so you claim. Stop. Jennifer stepped between them. You're not taking Emma. You're never taking her. Taking her. Dean's blood went cold. That's what this is about. Custody. Marcy lifted her chin. My granddaughter deserves better than a father with a criminal record who can barely keep his business afloat. Jennifer. Honey, I've talked to Chester. He says we have a strong case. Chester Herring. Marcy's younger brother, a family law attorney with a reputation for winning ugly custody battles. Dean had met him twice. Both times, Chester had looked at him like something stuck to his shoe. The pieces fell into place. This wasn't just Marcy's paranoia. This was a coordinated plan, something she'd been working on with her brother. The cameras were supposed to catch something, anything, they could use to paint Dean as dangerous or neglectful. You've already talked to a lawyer, Jennifer said. Before any of this, you've been planning to take Emma from us. From him, Marcy corrected. Jennifer, you can come with her. I have the guest house. Get out. Jennifer's voice was ice. Get out of my house. You're making a mistake. The only mistake I made was letting you manipulate me for 9 years. Jennifer opened the front door. Leave. Now. Marcy gathered her boxes, her expression cold and calculating. You'll regret this. Both of you. Chester is very good at what he does, and I have documentation of everything. Every late payment, every argument, every time Dean lost his temper. Documentation, Dean repeated. You mean fabricated evidence to go with your illegal surveillance. Call it what you want. The court will see a pattern of instability. She looked directly at Dean. You should have stayed in the foster system where you belong. After she left, Jennifer collapsed onto the couch. Oh God. Dean, what do we do? He sat beside her, pulling her close. His mind was already working through options, strategies. We call the police. Right now. We report everything. But what if she's right? What if Chester finds a way to twist this? He's connected. He knows judges. Then I'll find another way. Dean's voice was firm. Jennifer, I swear to you, I will not let them take Emma. Whatever it takes. She looked up at him, searching his face. What do you mean, whatever it takes? I mean, I'm done playing defense. Your mother wants a war? She's about to get one. Dean called the police at 4:47 p.m. 2 officers arrived within 30 minutes. Derek Rice and Daryl Bliss, both with the county sheriff's department. Dean walked them through everything. The music box, the hidden cameras, Marcy's admission about building a custody case. Officer Rice photographed the devices while Officer Bliss took their statements. This is serious, Bliss said. Recording a minor without parental consent, especially in a bedroom. That's a felony in this state. Will you arrest her? Jennifer asked. We need to verify the devices were actively recording and determine where the footage was being stored. Could be cloud-based, could be local. We'll need to search her residence. She'll delete everything, Dean said. Not if we move fast. Rice was already on his radio, calling for a detective and a search warrant. By 6:30 p.m., the situation had escalated. A detective named Van Weeks arrived, along with 3 more officers. They'd obtained an emergency warrant for Marcy's home and electronics based on the severity of the allegations. Mr. Copeland, Detective Weeks said, his weathered face serious. I need to ask you some difficult questions. Your mother-in-law is claiming you've been abusive to your daughter. She says she installed the cameras out of concern for the child's safety. That's a lie. I believe you, but I have to follow procedure. Has Emma ever had unexplained injuries? Has anyone from her school or a doctor's office raised concerns? Never. Jennifer's voice was firm. Emma's teacher loves Dean. Her pediatrician knows him. He's an incredible father. Good. We'll need statements from them. Weeks turned to Dean. Here's what's going to happen. We're going to Mrs. Gillespie's house right now with this warrant. Whatever we find there will determine the charges. In the meantime, I need you both to stay here. Don't contact her. Don't post about this on social media. Don't do anything that could be seen as interference. What about Emma? Jennifer asked. When can we bring her home? Tonight. Just keep her away from the investigation for now. After the police left, Dean and Jennifer sat in silence. The house felt different now, violated. Knowing that Marcy had been watching them, recording them, building her case. I should have seen it, Jennifer said quietly. All those times she came over, all those questions about her finances and your work schedule. She was gathering ammunition. This isn't your fault. She's my mother. I should have. Jennifer broke off, tears spilling down her cheeks. What they do, find something. What if Chester has other evidence we don't know about? Dean pulled her closer. Then we deal with it. Together. His phone rang. Detective Weeks. Mr. Copeland, we've executed the search warrant. You need to get down here. Now. The tone in his voice sent ice through Dean's veins. What did you find? Just get here. Bring your wife. They drove in silence through the darkening evening to Marcy's house, a pristine colonial in an expensive neighborhood. Police cars filled the driveway, their lights casting blue and red shadows across the manicured lawn. Detective Weeks met them at the door, his expression grim. We found a recording equipment, commercial grade, set up in her home office. But that's not all we found. He led them upstairs to a spare bedroom that had been converted into an office. Multiple monitors lined the desk, all connected to a central server. Dean felt sick as he realized what he was looking at, a live feed surveillance system. She was watching you in real time, Weeks explained. Recording everything. We got footage dating back 7 months. 7 months. Dean thought back, trying to remember when this had started. Then it hit him, right after he'd confronted Marcy about criticizing Jennifer's parenting in front of Emma. There's more, Weeks said. He opened a filing cabinet, revealing hundreds of pages of documents. She's been documenting everything. Every time you were late picking Emma up from school, every time you raise your voice, every financial hiccup. She's got bank statements, credit reports, even medical records. How did she get our medical records? Jennifer demanded. We're looking into that. Some of this was obtained illegally. Weeks pulled out a folder labeled Custody Case, Emma Copeland. Inside were draft legal documents, a timeline of incidents, and photographs. Dean flipped through them, his blood going cold. The photos had been manipulated, images of him looking angry or aggressive, paired with out-of-context quotes. One showed him raising his voice, captioned, "Verbal abuse witnessed by minor." What the caption didn't mention was that he'd been shouting at a contractor who'd shown up drunk to a job site, nowhere near Emma. This is all fake, he said. Twisted. I believe you. But this shows premeditation. She's been planning this for months. Weeks pulled out another folder. And then there's this. The folder contained financial records, large payments from Marcy to Chester Herring, along with emails discussing strategy. But what caught Dean's attention was a third name that kept appearing, a Dr. Julius Delaney, a child psychologist. Who's Delaney? Dean asked. According to these emails, he's been providing expert testimony in custody cases for Chester Herring. For a substantial fee, he writes reports determining that children are in danger and need to be removed from their parents. Jennifer grabbed the folder. Mom was going to pay this man to lie about Emma? More than that, Weeks said, look at the dates. She'd already scheduled Emma for appointments. 3 sessions. She was going to tell you it was for routine checkups, but she was actually building a psychological profile she could use in court. Dean felt rage building in his chest, but he forced himself to stay calm. What happens now? We're arresting Mrs. Gillespie tonight. Multiple felonies, illegal surveillance of a minor, identity theft for obtaining those medical records, conspiracy. Chester Herring is being brought in for questioning. If we can prove he knew about the illegal surveillance, he's looking at disbarment and potential criminal charges. And this Dr. Delaney? Dean asked. That's trickier. Providing biased expert testimony isn't technically illegal, unless we can prove fraud. But we're looking into his other cases. Weeks close the folders. Mr. Copeland, Mrs. Copeland, I need to be honest with you. This investigation is going to get ugly. Your mother-in-law has resources, and she's connected. Even with all this evidence, she's going to fight. Let her fight, Dean said. I'm ready. They arrested Marcy at 8:15 p.m. Dean and Jennifer watched from the unmarked car as officers led her out in handcuffs. She looked smaller somehow, diminished. But when her eyes found Dean through the car window, the hatred in them was absolute. On the drive home, Jennifer said, "She'll never forgive us for this. I don't want her forgiveness." Dean's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I want justice." But justice, he was learning, was more complicated than he'd thought. Because as Detective Weeks had warned, Marcy had resources, and she was only getting started. 3 days later, Dean sat in a conference room at the offices of Samuel Smith and Associates, the law firm Jennifer had hired to protect their family. Samuel Smith was in his 50s, with steel gray hair and the kind of calm competence that came from 30 years of practice. "Let me be clear," Smith said, spreading documents across the table. "Marcy Gillespie is facing serious criminal charges. The DA is pushing for multiple felonies. But that doesn't mean your custody of Emma is secure." "How is that possible?" Jennifer asked. "After everything she did." "Because the law doesn't work on emotion, Mrs. Copeland. It works on evidence and procedure." Smith pulled out a thick folder. Chester Herring filed an emergency petition for grandparent custody 2 hours after his sister was arrested. He's arguing that the arrest itself proves family instability and that Emma needs to be removed from the situation for her own protection. Dean felt his jaw clench. That's insane. That's strategy. And it's working. There's a hearing scheduled for Monday, 4 days from now. A judge will determine whether Emma should be placed in temporary foster care while the criminal case proceeds. Foster care? Jennifer's voice cracked. "They can't. She's our daughter." The argument is that Marcy's criminal behavior indicates a toxic family environment, that Emma has been exposed to illegal activity and potential danger. Chester's playing on the fear that you might have been complicit or at minimum negligent. Dean stood, pacing to the window. Below, people walked past without a care in the world. Their families weren't being torn apart by lawyers and legal maneuvers. "What do we need to do?" he asked. "Show that you're stable, responsible parents. Show that Emma is safe and thriving. Show that Marcy's actions were isolated and that you took appropriate action immediately." Smith paused. "But there's a problem. Chester Herring is good at his job. He's going to paint you, Mr. Copeland, as the reason for all of this. He'll argue that Marcy's concerns about you were legitimate, even if her methods were illegal. So I'm on trial." "Essentially, yes. Your background, your finances, your parenting, all of it will be scrutinized." Smith pulled out another document. "They've already subpoenaed your business records, your tax return for the past 5 years, and your complete foster care history." "My foster care history is sealed. Juvenile records are sealed. Administrative records from the foster care system can be accessed in custody cases. They're going to dig up every placement, every incident, every reason you were moved from home to home." Dean thought about those years, the foster fathers who'd used him for free labor, the foster mothers who'd locked him in closets, the homes where he'd been just another check from the state. He'd survived by becoming invisible, by never complaining, by never letting them see him break. "Let them dig," he said. "I'm not ashamed of surviving." "Good. But you need to understand what we're up against. Chester Herring has won cases against parents with spotless records. He's going to make you look dangerous, unstable, unfit, and the judge may err on the side of caution." Jennifer reached for Dean's hand. "What can we do to fight this?" Smith leaned back in his chair. "We build our own case. Character witnesses, expert testimony, documentation of your parenting. We show that Emma is happy, healthy, and loved. We show that removing her would cause more harm than good." "And what about Marcy?" Dean asked. "What about making her pay for what she did?" "The criminal case will proceed regardless. But Mr. Copeland, I need to advise you. Revenge isn't justice. Whatever you're thinking, don't do it. Don't contact Marcy. Don't post about her on social media. Don't do anything that could be used against you in court." Dean nodded, but his mind was already working. Because Samuel Smith was right about one thing. The law didn't work on emotion. It worked on evidence and procedure. And Dean was learning that he could use that too. That evening, after Emma had gone to bed, Dean sat in his workshop. The music box was still there, on his workbench, now just evidence in a police investigation. He'd built this workshop with his own hands, timber by timber. He'd built their house too, adding on a sunroom for Jennifer and expanding Emma's bedroom, so she'd have space to grow. Everything he had, he'd earned. Nobody had given him anything. His phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. You should have let her go when you had the chance. Now you'll lose everything. Chester Herring. Had to be. Dean stared at the message, then typed back. I'm not losing anything. But you might want to ask your sister exactly what she's done. 3 dots appeared, then disappeared. No response. Dean pulled out his laptop and started researching. If Chester Herring wanted to play games, Dean needed to understand the rules. He searched for Chester's past cases, looking for patterns, weaknesses, anything he could use. What he found was disturbing. Chester had 112 custody cases in the past 3 years, all of them involving grandparents seeking custody of grandchildren. And in every case, the same expert witness had testified, Dr. Julius Delaney. Dean dug deeper. Delaney had a practice in the city, specializing in child psychology and custody evaluations. His website looked professional, his credentials impressive. But when Dean checked the state licensing board, something interesting appeared. 3 complaints filed against Delaney in the past 2 years, all alleging bias in testimony. The complaints had been dismissed, but the details were public record. Dean read through them, his investigative instincts, honed through years of quality control and carpentry, picking up on patterns. In each case, Delaney had evaluated a child for custody purposes and determined they were in danger. In each case, custody had been transferred to grandparents. In each case, Chester Herring had been the attorney. And in each case, the original custody holders had been working-class parents without resources to fight back. Dean took screenshots of everything, organizing them into folders. Samuel Smith had said, "Don't seek revenge," but this wasn't revenge. This was due diligence. This was preparing for war. His phone rang. Detective Weeks. Mr. Copeland, we have an update on the investigation. What is it? Marcy Gillespie made bail this afternoon. $50,000 cash. She's out. Dean felt his chest tighten. Already, her lawyer argued she wasn't a flight risk and that the charges were overblown. The judge agreed to supervised release with GPS monitoring. Weeks paused. There's a restraining order in place. She's not allowed within 500 feet of you, your wife, or Emma. But I want you to be careful. People who feel backed into a corner can be unpredictable. After hanging up, Dean checked the security system he'd installed. Cameras at all entrances, motion sensors, deadbolts on every door. He'd built this house to be a fortress, and now he understood why his instincts had pushed him in that direction. Jennifer appeared in the doorway. Emma wants you to say goodnight. He found his daughter in her bed, surrounded by stuffed animals. They'd moved her into the guest room, while the police finished processing her old bedroom. She'd taken it surprisingly well, more adaptable than most 7-year-olds. Daddy, when can I sleep in my real room again? Soon, sweetheart. He sat on the edge of the bed. How are you feeling about everything? Emma considered the question with the seriousness only a child could muster. I don't understand why Grandma Marcy would want to watch me without asking. That's what creepy people do. Dean's heart clenched. Yeah, it is. Is she going to go to jail? Maybe. Would that make you sad? A little. But also, Emma looked up at him with those blue eyes. She wasn't very nice to you. I noticed that. She always said mean things when you weren't listening. Like what? Like you weren't smart enough, or you didn't make enough money, or you were going to leave us someday. Emma picked at her blanket. But I knew that wasn't true. You built our whole house. You're the smartest person I know. Dean pulled her into a hug, blinking back unexpected tears. This was what he was fighting for. This was what Marcy and Chester were trying to take away. I love you, Emma, more than anything in the world. I love you too, Daddy. After she fell asleep, Dean returned to his workshop. He had 4 days until the hearing. 4 days to build a case that would protect his daughter. 4 days to outmaneuver Chester Herring and his corrupt network. He opened his laptop and continued researching, cross-referencing names and cases. And slowly, a pattern emerged. Chester Herring didn't just win custody cases. He specialized in them. And he always used the same playbook. Find a working-class parent, manufacture concerns about their fitness, bring in Delaney for expert testimony, and transfer custody to wealthier grandparents. It was a system, an algorithm. And once Dean understood the algorithm, he could break it. He pulled up the complaint files again, reading more carefully this time. One name kept appearing. A social worker named Lisa Kuhn who'd filed 2 of the complaints against Delaney. According to the documents, she disagreed with his assessments in multiple cases, believing he was providing biased testimony for financial gain. Dean found her contact information through a professional directory. It was late, but he sent an email anyway. Ms. Kuhn, my name is Dean Copeland. I'm currently facing a custody challenge from my mother-in-law, and Dr. Julius Delaney is likely to be called as an expert witness against me. I read your complaints against him and would appreciate the opportunity to speak with you about his pattern of biased testimony. This is urgent. My hearing is Monday. Please call me at your earliest convenience. He hit send, knowing it was a long shot. But long shots were all he had right now. At midnight, his phone buzzed. An email response from Lisa Kuhn. Mr. Copeland, I've been waiting for someone to take this seriously. I have documentation on 12 cases where Delaney provided false testimony. Meet me tomorrow, 2 p.m., at the coffee shop on Elm Street. Come alone. And Mr. Copeland, be very careful. Chester Herring has powerful friends. Dean stared at the message, his heart pounding. This was it. This was the thread he needed to pull. He responded immediately. I'll be there. Thank you. Jennifer appeared in the doorway. It's late. Come to bed. In a minute. He closed the laptop. Jen, I need to ask you something. If things get worse before they get better, if I have to do things that might not look good in court, can you trust me? She crossed the workshop and took his hands. I've always trusted you. From the first day we met, when everyone else saw a guy from the foster system with no prospects, I saw someone who'd fought for everything he had. Someone who knew how to survive. She squeezed his hands. Whatever you need to do, I'm with you. Dean pulled her close, breathing in the familiar scent of her hair. He'd spent 9 years being the perfect son-in-law, trying to prove his worth to Marcy Gillespie, trying to show her he was good enough for her daughter. But Marcy had never wanted to see him as good enough. She'd wanted to destroy him. And now, finally, Dean was done playing defense. It was time to show Marcy, Chester, and Dr. Delaney exactly what happened when you backed a survivor into a corner. It was time to fight back. The coffee shop on Elm Street was the kind of place that attracted freelancers and college students. Exposed brick walls, mismatched furniture, the hiss and gurgle of espresso machines. Dean arrived 15 minutes early, choosing a corner table with a clear view of the entrance. Lisa Kuhn walked in exactly at 2 p.m. She was in her mid-40s, with wire-rimmed glasses and graying hair pulled back in a practical bun. She carried a worn leather messenger bag that looked like it had seen 1,000 case files. She spotted Dean immediately and crossed to his table. Mr. Copeland? Dean, please. He gestured to the chair across from him. Thank you for meeting with me. She sat, pulling out a thick folder from her bag. I've been a social worker for 23 years. In that time, I've seen a lot of things that made me question the system. But nothing has made me angrier than watching Julius Delaney profit from destroying families. Tell me about him. Lisa opened the folder, revealing pages of documentation. Delaney has a very specific business model. He partners with custody attorneys, Chester Herring being his primary client, and provides expert testimony that supports the attorney's case. Always, regardless of the actual facts. How does he get away with it? Because expert witnesses have broad discretion in their assessments. Unless you can prove outright fraud, which is nearly impossible, he can frame his opinions however he wants. And Chester Herring is very good at finding judges who trust expert testimony over evidence. Dean studied the documents. Case after case of families torn apart. You filed complaints. Why weren't they pursued? Because Delaney is connected. He serves on state boards. He's published papers. He has relationships with judges and politicians. My complaints were dismissed as sour grapes from a social worker who disagreed with his professional opinion. Lisa's voice was bitter. But I kept documenting everything. Every case, every inconsistency, every pattern. Why? Because someday, someone would have the resources and the motive to actually fight back. And I wanted to be ready. She looked at Dean directly. Are you that someone, Mr. Copeland? I don't have resources. I have a small carpentry business and a mortgage. But I have motive. Dean leaned forward. They're trying to take my daughter, and I will do whatever it takes to stop them. Lisa smiled grimly. Then we might actually have a chance. Tell me about your case. Dean walked her through everything. The hidden cameras, Marcy's arrest, the emergency custody petition, the hearing on Monday. Lisa listened without interrupting, her expression growing darker. Classic Herring strategy, she said when he finished. Create a crisis, file emergency motions, bring in Delaney to rubber stamp concerns about family instability. And the beauty of it, from their perspective, is that your mother-in-law's arrest actually helps their case. They'll argue the whole family is toxic. How do I fight it? You attack the foundation. Herring's cases work because judges trust Delaney's expertise. But if you can show that Delaney has a pattern of bias, a financial relationship with Herring, and a history of providing false testimony, then his assessment of your family becomes worthless. Will a judge listen? If you present it right. Lisa pulled out a spreadsheet. I've analyzed Delaney's testimony in 43 custody cases over the past 5 years. In every single case where Chester Herring was the attorney, Delaney's assessment supported transfer in custody. Every single one. That's not professional judgment. That's a business arrangement. Dean felt hope stirring. Can you testify to that? I can. But you need to understand what you're asking. Chester Herring will come after me. He'll question my credibility, my motives, my professional record. He'll make it ugly. Why would you take that risk? Lisa was quiet for a moment, then pulled out a photograph. A teenage girl with Lisa's eyes. My niece, Shelley. 6 years ago, her mother, my sister, was going through a divorce. Her ex-husband's parents wanted custody of Shelley. They hired Chester Herring. He brought in Julius Delaney. And Delaney wrote a report saying my sister was emotionally unstable and potentially dangerous. Was she? She was depressed. Going through a divorce, struggling financially, yes. But dangerous? Never. She loved Shelley more than anything. Lisa's hands tightened on the photo. They took custody anyway. Shelley went to live with her grandparents. And 6 months later, my sister killed herself. Dean felt his chest constrict. I'm sorry. Shelley's 18 now. She barely speaks to me. The grandparents poisoned her against our whole family. Lisa looked up, her eyes fierce. So yes, I'll testify. I'll risk whatever Herring throws at me. Because I won't let another family be destroyed by these people. They spent the next 2 hours going through Lisa's documentation. The pattern was undeniable. Delaney had provided biased testimony in dozens of cases, always supporting the side that paid him. And Chester Herring had profited from every single one. I need to give this to my lawyer, Dean said. Samuel Smith. Do you know him? By reputation. He's good, but he's conservative. You might not want to go after Delaney this aggressively. Then I'll convince him. Because this is our shot. Lisa gathered her documents. Be careful, Dean. Chester Herring doesn't just win in court. He destroys people who oppose him. He'll dig up everything in your past, twist it, use it against you. Let him try. Dean stood, shaking her hand. Thank you. For caring. For keeping records. For fighting. Save your thanks until after Monday. We haven't won yet. Dean drove straight to Samuel Smith's office, the folder of documentation on the passenger seat. His lawyer was meeting with another client, but Dean insisted it was urgent. When Smith finally saw him, Dean spread Lisa Kuhn's evidence across the conference table. I found something, a pattern of fraud and bias in Chester Herring's cases. And I found a witness willing to testify. Smith studied the documents, his expression shifting from skepticism to interest. This is substantial. If even half of this is accurate, Delaney's credibility is shot. It's all accurate. Lisa Kuhn has been documenting this for years. And she'll testify on Monday? Yes. Smith leaned back in his chair. This changes things. But Herring will fight dirty. He'll attack Kuhn. He'll argue this is all circumstantial. he'll try to exclude the testimony entirely. Can he? He'll try. But if I can get this in front of the judge, if I can show the pattern. Smith's eyes gleamed with the kind of strategic calculation that came from decades of practice. We might not just win the custody hearing. We might expose an entire network of corruption. That's what I want. I want them all to pay. Then we need to be smart about this. We present just enough on Monday to win the hearing, but we hold back the most damaging evidence. Smith tapped the folder. We use it to build a broader case. Maybe get the DA involved, maybe the State Bar Association. We don't just win. We make sure they can never do this to another family. Dean nodded slowly. You're talking about a longer game. I'm talking about destroying them completely. But it requires patience and precision. Smith met his eyes. Are you capable of that, Mr. Copeland? Or are you looking for immediate revenge? Dean thought about Emma, about Jennifer, about all the families in Lisa Kuhn's documentation. I want justice. Real justice. Not just for us, but for everyone they've hurt. Then let's get to work. They spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. Smith drafted motions, organized evidence, planned strategy. By the time Dean left at 7 p.m., they had a solid case for Monday's hearing. But Dean's mind was already moving beyond Monday. Because Lisa Kuhn's documentation had shown him something else. Chester Herring's network extended beyond just Delaney. There were judges who seemed to always rule in his favor, social workers who provided convenient reports, even police officers who'd written selective incident reports. It was a machine, an efficient, profitable machine that ground up working-class families and spit out billable hours. Dean drove home, his hands tight on the steering wheel. He'd spent his whole life being underestimated, being dismissed as not good enough. But that had taught him something valuable. How to watch, how to learn, how to find weaknesses in systems that seemed impenetrable. When he walked into the house, Jennifer and Emma were making dinner together. Pasta and garlic bread, Emma's favorite. His daughter ran to hug him, her small arms tight around his waist. Daddy, guess what? I got an A on my spelling test. That's amazing, sweetheart. He lifted her up, spinning her around like he'd done when she was younger. Her laughter filled the kitchen, pure and bright. This was what they were trying to take from him. This moment, this joy, this family. Over Emma's shoulder, Dean met Jennifer's eyes. She saw something in his expression that made her pause. What happened? She asked after Emma had run off to set the table. I think I found a way to win. But it's going to get worse before it gets better. How much worse? They're going to dig up everything. Every mistake I've ever made. Every time I've lost my temper. Every financial problem we've had. They're going to try to paint me as dangerous. Jennifer stepped closer, taking his hands. Then we show them who you really are. We show them the man who worked 3 jobs to save for our wedding. The man who built Emma's playhouse by hand when we couldn't afford to buy one. The man who's never once missed a parent-teacher conference or a soccer game. Her voice was fierce. We show them that you're the best father Emma could ever have. Dean pulled her into a hug, grateful for her faith in him. But he also knew that character witnesses and testimony wouldn't be enough. Chester Herring was too good at his job, and he'd been winning cases like this for years. No, Dean needed something more. He needed leverage. He needed to find Chester Herring's weakness and exploit it without mercy. After dinner, after Emma had gone to bed, Dean returned to his research. He'd learned carpentry by studying the masters, by understanding how joints fit together, how wood grain affected strength, how everything in a structure connected. He applied that same analytical approach now, mapping out Chester Herring's network. Every case, every connection, every pattern of behavior. And slowly, he began to see the cracks. Chester had won a lot of cases, but he'd also lost a few. And in those losses, there were always the same factors. Aggressive defense attorneys who'd attacked his credibility, evidence of financial impropriety, and judges who weren't part of his usual rotation. Dean made notes, cross-referencing dates and names. He found something interesting. One of Chester's losses had come in a case where the defendant had hired a private investigator who documented Chester's meetings with Delaney. The investigator had caught them discussing case strategy, coordinating testimony, essentially conspiring to manufacture evidence. The case had been settled quietly, with all parties signing NDAs. But the investigator's name was in the public filings, Rob Tompkins. Dean searched for Tompkins and found his website. He was still in business, still doing investigations. His specialty, uncovering corruption in family court cases. Dean picked up his phone and dialed. It rang 4 times, then Tompkins Investigations. Mr. Tompkins, my name is Dean Copeland. I'm dealing with Chester Herring in a custody case, and I found your name in connection with a previous case against him. There was a long pause. Chester Herring. Yeah, I remember that son of a bitch. What's he doing now? Trying to take my daughter. With help from Julius Delaney. Delaney, of course. Tompkins sighed. Mr. Copeland, I'm going to be straight with you. Going after Herring is expensive and dangerous. He's got connections, money, and he doesn't play fair. Neither do I. Not anymore. Dean's voice was steel. I need someone who can document everything. Meetings, payments, communications. I need evidence that will hold up in court. That kind of investigation costs. We're talking $20,000, $30,000 minimum. Dean thought about his savings account, the emergency fund he'd been building for years. I'll pay it. Whatever it takes. When's your hearing? Monday. That's not enough time for a full investigation. But, Tompkins paused. I might be able to get you something preliminary. Some of my old surveillance from the previous case might still be relevant. And I can start fresh monitoring on Herring and Delaney, see if they're stupid enough to meet again. Do it. I'll need a retainer. $5,000, wired today. You'll have it within the hour. After hanging up, Dean transferred the money, watching his savings account drop by a third. Jennifer appeared behind him. What are you doing? He explained about Tompkins, about the investigation, about the cost. Jennifer was quiet for a long moment. That's Emma's college fund, she finally said. Emma doesn't need a college fund if she's not living with us. Jennifer sat beside him at the desk. You're all in, aren't you? No holding back. They drew first blood. They came into our home. They watched our daughter. They built a case to destroy our family. So yes, I'm all in. And I'm going to make sure they regret ever coming after us. What if we lose? We won't. But what if? Jennifer. Dean turned to face her. I've lost before. I lost my parents, lost every foster home, lost every chance at a normal childhood. But I learned something from all that losing. How to survive. How to fight. How to win when everyone thinks you're beaten. He took her hands. I will not lose Emma. I will not lose you. Whatever it takes, whatever I have to do, I will protect this family. She nodded slowly. Okay, I trust you. Get some sleep. Monday's going to be a long day. But Dean didn't sleep. He stayed up until 3 a.m., coordinating with Rob Tompkins, organizing evidence with Samuel Smith, and preparing for war. Because war was what this had become. And Dean Copeland had learned something important during his years in foster care, something that Marcy and Chester had never had to learn. How to fight when you had nothing left to lose. Monday morning arrived gray and cold. Dean wore his only suit, one he'd bought for his wedding 9 years ago. It still fit barely. Jennifer wore a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, minimal makeup. They needed to look like responsible, stable parents. Emma stayed with Olivia's family. Dean had knelt down that morning, looking his daughter in the eyes, and promised her, I'll be home tonight, and everything will be okay. Promise, promise. Now, standing outside the courthouse, Dean felt the weight of that promise. Samuel Smith joined them, carrying his briefcase. Ready? The lawyer asked. Ready. They walked into the courthouse together, through metal detectors, and past courthouse security. The hearing was in family court, Judge Dennis Horn presiding. Dean had looked him up, 62 years old, 20 years on the bench, reputation for being fair but strict. Chester Herring was already there, sitting at the opposing table. He was in his early 50s, with the kind of polished appearance that came from expensive suits and regular haircuts. When he saw Dean, he smiled. It wasn't a friendly smile. Marcy Gillespie sat behind Chester, wearing her GPS monitoring anklet. She looked smaller than Dean remembered, older. But her eyes, when they met his, were filled with poison. All rise, the bailiff announced. The Honorable Judge Dennis Horn presiding. Judge Horn entered, taking his seat. Let's begin. This is an emergency hearing regarding temporary custody of Emma Copeland, age 7. Mr. Herring, you filed the petition. Make your case. Chester stood, buttoning his jacket. Thank you, Your Honor. We're here today because a child is in danger. My client, Marcy Gillespie, is a maternal grandmother of Emma Copeland. Mrs. Gillespie has serious, documented concerns about the fitness of Emma's father, Dean Copeland. Dean forced himself to stay calm, to not react. Mrs. Gillespie's concerns led her to take action. Action that, yes, violated the law. She's been arrested, and she will face those consequences. But, Your Honor, her concerns were not unfounded. We have evidence that Mr. Copeland has a history of violence, financial instability, and emotional volatility. We have evidence that Emma has been exposed to an unsafe home environment. What evidence? Judge Horn asked. Chester pulled out a folder. Bank records showing late mortgage payments, unpaid bills, evidence of financial distress. School records showing Emma was picked up late on multiple occasions. Testimony from neighbors about arguments, raised voices, domestic disturbances. Samuel Smith stood. Your Honor, this is exactly what happens when someone breaks the law and then tries to justify it after the fact. Mrs. Gillespie conducted illegal surveillance of a minor child, and now Mr. Herring is trying to use that crime as evidence that the parents are unfit. That's absurd. The surveillance was illegal, Chester agreed. But what it revealed was true. Mr. Copeland has a sealed juvenile record. For stealing food when he was starving, Smith cut in. A minor offense that was sealed precisely because it shouldn't be held against him. Let me finish, Counselor, Chester said smoothly. Mr. Copeland's background shows a pattern of instability. He bounced between 7 foster homes in 4 years. He has no family support system, no college degree, no professional credentials. He has a successful business that he built himself, Smith countered. He's an excellent father, a devoted husband, and a hard-working member of this community. Judge Horn held up his hand. Gentlemen, I've read your filings. Mr. Herring, do you have any evidence, real, admissible evidence, that Emma Copeland is in danger? I have an expert witness prepared to testify, Your Honor. Dr. Julius Delaney, a licensed child psychologist who's reviewed the case materials. Based on what? Smith demanded. He's never met Emma, never observed the family, never conducted an actual evaluation. He's reviewed documentation provided by Mrs. Gillespie, along with publicly available records, Chester said. Judge Horn looked skeptical. An expert who's never met the child in question. That's unusual, Mr. Herring. These are unusual circumstances, Your Honor. I'm sure they are. The judge turned to Samuel Smith. Mr. Smith, what do you have? Smith stood, his confidence evident. We have actual evidence, Your Honor. Character witnesses who know the Copeland family. Emma's teacher, her pediatrician, neighbors who've observed Dean Copeland's parenting for years. We have Emma's school records showing she's a happy, well-adjusted child. We have financial records showing that yes, the Copelands have faced normal financial pressures, but they've never missed a payment on essentials for their daughter. And we have something else, Smith continued. We have evidence that this entire case is built on a corrupt foundation. That Dr. Delaney has a financial relationship with Mr. Herring. That he provides biased testimony for payment. That this isn't about Emma's safety at all. It's about grandparent rights and revenge. Chester's face flushed. That's a serious accusation, Counselor. It's a serious situation. Smith pulled out Lisa Kuhn's documentation. Your Honor, I have evidence of a pattern of biased testimony by Dr. Delaney. Documentation showing he's testified in 43 custody cases, and in every single case where Mr. Herring was the attorney, his testimony supported Mr. Herring's position. Judge Horn leaned forward. Every single case. Every one. That's not professional judgment. That's a business arrangement. Your Honor, this is character assassination, Chester protested. Dr. Delaney is a respected expert. With 3 complaints filed against him for bias, Smith interrupted. All documented with the state licensing board. The judge looked between the 2 attorneys. Mr. Herring, I'm going to need more than Dr. Delaney's report if you want me to remove a child from her parents. Do you have anyone who's actually observed this family? Anyone who's witnessed abuse or neglect firsthand? Chester hesitated. Dean could see him calculating weighing options. "We have Mrs. Gillespie's testimony," Chester finally said. "The woman who's currently facing felony charges for illegally surveilling a minor." Judge Horn's skepticism was clear. "That's your star witness?" Her concerns were legitimate. Her concerns led her to commit crimes, Mr. Herring. That doesn't make them legitimate. The judge looked at the documents before him. "I've seen enough. This emergency petition is denied. Emma Copeland will remain with her parents, pending the outcome of the criminal case against Mrs. Gillespie." Dean felt relief flood through him. Jennifer grabbed his hand, squeezing tight. But Chester wasn't done. "Your Honor, I request supervised visitation for Mrs. Gillespie." Request denied. The existing restraining order stands. Judge Horn closed the file. "Mr. Copeland, Mrs. Copeland, I want to be clear. This isn't a complete victory. The criminal case against Mrs. Gillespie will proceed, and depending on what comes out in that trial, we may revisit this issue. But for now, I see no evidence that your daughter is in danger." "Thank you, Your Honor," Samuel Smith said. "Don't thank me yet," the judge warned. "Because if I find out that any of the concerns raised today have merit, I will not hesitate to act. The child's safety is paramount." "Understood, Your Honor." After the judge left, Dean and Jennifer embraced. Samuel Smith gathered his documents, satisfaction evident on his face. "We won," Jennifer whispered. "We survived," Dean corrected, because he knew this wasn't over. Chester Herring had lost this round, but men like him didn't accept defeat gracefully. As they left the courtroom, Chester blocked their path. "This isn't finished, Copeland." "No," Dean agreed. "It's not. But you just lost the first battle. You have no idea what you're dealing with." "Neither do you." Dean stepped closer, his voice low. "I know about your arrangement with Delaney. I know about the other cases, the other families you've destroyed. And I'm going to make sure everyone else knows too." Chester's confident smile faltered. "Careful. You're treading on dangerous ground." "So are you." They left Chester standing in the courthouse hallway, his expression dark with rage. Outside, the sun had broken through the clouds. Dean took a deep breath of cold air, feeling like he could breathe properly for the first time in days. "What happens now?" Jennifer asked. "Now we go home, pick up Emma, and celebrate." Dean looked at Samuel Smith. "And then we start building the case that brings down their whole operation." Smith nodded. "I'll contact the DA's office. With Lisa Kuhn's testimony and the evidence we've gathered, we might be able to open a broader investigation." "Do it." They drove home, the courthouse shrinking in the rearview mirror. Dean knew the fight wasn't over. There would be the criminal trial, probably more legal maneuvering from Chester, more attempts to undermine him. But today he'd won. Today, he protected his family. And that was all that mattered. Emma's reunion with them was everything Dean needed. She ran into his arms, her small body trembling with relief. "You're home. You promised you'd come home." "I always keep my promises, sweetheart." He held her tight, breathing in the familiar smell of her strawberry shampoo. They had a quiet dinner, just the three of them. Emma chattered about her day at Olivia's house, about the games they'd played and the movie they'd watched. Normal childhood things. Safe things. After Emma went to bed, Dean sat in his workshop with a beer, processing the day. They'd won the hearing, but Chester's threat echoed in his mind. This isn't finished. He was right. The criminal case against Marcy would go to trial, and Chester would defend her aggressively. And based on Lisa Kuhn's documentation, Dean now understood that Chester had too much invested in this network to let it fall apart without a fight. His phone rang. "Rob Tompkins. I've got something," the investigator said without preamble. "Delaney and Herring met tonight at a restaurant downtown. I got photos, audio, the works." "What are they discussing?" "Your case, and how to salvage it." Herring's pissed about losing the hearing. Delaney suggested they could still build a case for the criminal trial, make Marcy look sympathetic, paint you as the real danger. Tompkins paused. "But here's the interesting part. They discussed payment. Delaney wants $50,000 for his testimony at Marcy's trial. And Herring said he'd get it from his usual sources." "What does that mean?" "That's what I'm going to find out." "But Dean, this is conspiracy. If I can document payments, if I can show they're coordinating testimony for money, that's witness tampering. That's disbarment for Herring and potential criminal charges for both of them. Dean felt something cold and determined settle in his chest. Keep digging. Document everything. This is going to cost more. I don't care. Whatever it takes. After hanging up, Dean opened his laptop and started reviewing Lisa Kuhn's files again. She'd documented 12 cases where Chester and Delaney had worked together. 12 families torn apart for profit. He started making a list of names, parents who'd lost custody, who'd been destroyed by false testimony. If he could find them, if he could get them to come forward, they could build a class action case. Something big enough that even Chester's connections couldn't protect him. Jennifer appeared with 2 mugs of coffee. You're planning something. I'm finishing something they started. She sat beside him, looking at the names on the screen. These are all the people they hurt. Just the ones Lisa could document. There are probably more. What are you going to do? I'm going to contact them. I'm going to show them what we found. And I'm going to give them a chance to get justice too. Dean looked at his wife. This isn't just about us anymore, Jen. It's about stopping them from ever doing this again. She was quiet for a long moment, then nodded. Then let's do it. Let's burn their whole corrupt system to the ground. Over the next 3 days, Dean became a man on a mission. He contacted every family on Lisa Kuhn's list, telling them about the evidence, about the pattern of fraud. Most were skeptical. They'd been beaten down by the system, had given up hope of justice. But a few listened. A few agreed to come forward. One of them was Oscar Brown, a mechanic who'd lost custody of his 2 sons to his ex-wife's parents 4 years ago. Chester Herring had represented the grandparents. Julius Delaney had testified that Oscar was violent and unstable based on a single angry voicemail Oscar had left during the divorce. I haven't seen my boys in 3 years, Oscar told Dean over the phone. The grandparents moved them to another state. My ex committed suicide 2 years ago, and they still won't let me see my own kids. Would you be willing to testify about Delaney's bias? If it'll help stop these bastards from doing this to someone else? Absolutely. Another was Ramona Chapman, who'd lost her daughter to her ex-husband's wealthy parents. Chester had argued that Ramona's job as a night shift nurse made her an unfit mother. Delaney had agreed, despite the fact that her daughter was happy and thriving. They took her because I wasn't rich enough, Ramona said, her voice bitter. That's what it came down to. I worked nights to pay the bills, and they twisted it into neglect. Will you help us? Tell me what you need. By Friday, Dean had 8 families willing to come forward. 8 cases of documented bias and fraud. Samuel Smith was working with the DA's office to investigate, and Rob Tompkins continued his surveillance. But Chester Herring wasn't sitting idle. On Friday evening, Dean received a registered letter. Inside was a notice of a civil lawsuit. Marcy Gillespie was suing him for defamation, emotional distress, and false arrest. The damages sought, $500,000. She's suing us. Jennifer stared at the papers in disbelief. After what she did, Dean read through the lawsuit carefully. It was pure theater, designed to drain their resources and intimidate them into backing down. Chester knew they couldn't afford a prolonged civil case on top of everything else. This is strategy, Dean said. Chester's trying to overwhelm us, force us to settle, make the evidence we've gathered go away. Can he do that? He can try. Dean picked up his phone and called Samuel Smith. After explaining the situation, Smith let out a long sigh. This is classic Chester Herring. He knows you've got him cornered on the criminal case, so he's opening a second front, trying to bleed you dry with legal fees. What do? We file a motion to dismiss based on abuse of process, and we countersue for malicious prosecution. Smith paused. But Dean, I have to be honest. This is going to cost you. Even if we win, you're looking at tens of thousands in legal fees. Dean thought about his savings account, already depleted by Tompkins' investigation. He thought about Emma's future, about the business he'd built, about everything he'd worked for. Then he thought about the 8 families Chester had destroyed, about Lisa Kuhn's niece, whose mother had killed herself, about all the children who'd been taken from loving parents because those parents didn't have enough money or connections. Do it, he said. File the motion. Countersue. Whatever it takes. That weekend, Dean barely slept. He worked in his shop during the day, filling custom furniture orders, trying to keep money coming in. At night, he coordinated with Tompkins, with Samuel Smith, with the families who'd agreed to testify. Emma noticed his exhaustion. On Sunday morning, she climbed into his lap while he was working at his computer. "Daddy, are you okay?" He closed the laptop, giving her his full attention. "I'm tired, sweetheart, but I'm okay. Is Grandma Marcy still trying to take me away?" Dean had tried to shield her from the details, but Emma was perceptive. "She's not going to take you away. I promise." "Good, because I don't want to live with her. She's mean. Has she always been mean to you?" Emma thought about it. She was nice when Mommy was around. But when it was just us, she asked weird questions. Like, does Daddy ever yell at Mommy? Does Daddy ever hurt me? Does Daddy drink beer and fall asleep? Emma's face scrunched up. I told her no to all of it, but she kept asking like she wanted me to say yes. Dean's chest tightened. Marcy had been coaching Emma, trying to get her to provide evidence. "You did the right thing by telling the truth." "I know. You always tell the truth, even when it's hard." "So I do too." After Emma left to play with her toys, Dean sat there processing. Marcy had tried to manipulate his daughter, to turn her into a weapon against him. The depths of her cruelty were stunning. His phone buzzed. A text from Rob Tompkins. "Check your email. I found something big." Dean opened his laptop and pulled up the email. It contained photos and audio files, along with Tompkins' notes. The photos showed Chester Herring and Julius Delaney meeting at a hotel bar. But they weren't alone. There was a third person in the photos. A woman Dean didn't recognize. According to Tompkins' notes, her name was Annette Horton. She was a court-appointed social worker who'd been assigned to evaluate families in several of Chester's cases. The audio was even more damning. Tompkins had somehow managed to bug their table, and the recording was clear. Herring's voice, "Annette, we need you on the Gillespie case. Write a report suggesting the family environment is unstable. Annette, I need to actually visit the home. Delaney, no you don't. Just base it on our documentation. Say you have concerns based on the father's background and the circumstances of Mrs. Gillespie's arrest. Annette, that's not proper procedure. Herring, 20,000. Same as always. Cash." There was a pause on the recording, then Annette's voice, quieter, "Send me the case file." Dean listened to the recording 3 times, his rage building with each play. They were bribing a court-appointed social worker to provide false reports. This was the network, a web of corruption that Chester had built over years, maybe decades. He forwarded the email to Samuel Smith with a message. "We've got them." Smith called 5 minutes later. "Dean, this is incredible. With this recording, we can bring down the entire operation. But we need to be strategic. If we release this now, before the criminal trial, Chester's lawyers will get it suppressed as illegally obtained evidence. So what do? We wait. We let Marcy's criminal trial proceed. Chester will bring in Delaney to testify. He'll bring in Annette Horton. And then, when they're committed to their testimony, when they're under oath, we drop this bomb. We show the jury that the entire defense is built on paid lies. That could take months. Yes, but it's the only way to ensure they all face consequences." Smith's voice was firm. "Dean, I know you want immediate justice. But if we play this right, we can get Chester Herring disbarred, Julius Delaney's license revoked, Annette Horton charged with fraud. We can destroy the entire network." Dean thought about the 8 families waiting for justice. Thought about Emma, about Jennifer, about the life they tried to build. How long until the trial? DA's pushing for May. 3 months. 3 months of living under a cloud. 3 months of Marcy's civil lawsuit draining our resources. 3 months of looking over our shoulders. Yes, but at the end of it, you'll have your life back. And they'll have nothing. Dean made his decision. "Okay, we wait. But Smith, I want every piece of evidence documented and secured. Multiple copies, cloud backup, everything. Because if Chester gets a whiff of what we have, he'll try to destroy it." Already on it. After hanging up, Dean went to find Jennifer. She was in the kitchen, preparing lunch. He told her about the recording, about Smith's plan to wait for the trial. 3 more months, she said quietly. "Can we survive 3 more months of this? We could survive anything." He pulled her close. "And when it's over, when they're all exposed and facing charges, it'll be worth it. Promise. Promise." That night, After Emma was asleep, Dean and Jennifer sat on the back porch. The same porch where Emma had first shown him the hole in the music box. That felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 2 weeks. "Do you remember our first date?" Jennifer asked suddenly. Dean smiled. "The coffee shop on Main Street. You showed up 20 minutes late. I was nervous. My mom had spent all morning telling me I was making a mistake, that you were just some guy from nowhere trying to take advantage of me. But you came anyway. I came because I saw something in you that my mom couldn't see. Strength, determination, someone who'd survived things she couldn't imagine and came out stronger for it." Jennifer took his hand. "I'm glad I didn't listen to her that day." "Me too." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the stars emerge. Somewhere out there, Chester Herring and Marcy Gillespie were planning their next move. But here, in this moment, Dean felt at peace. He'd spent his life fighting for food, fighting for shelter, fighting for a place in the world. And now he was fighting for his family. It was the most important fight of his life. And he was going to win. The next 3 months passed in a blur of legal proceedings and investigations. Marcy's criminal trial was set for May 15th, and both sides were preparing aggressively. The DA had assigned the case to a prosecutor named Tim Lozano, a former public defender who'd switched sides after seeing too many guilty people walk free. He took one look at the evidence against Marcy and Chester's network and decided to make it his mission to bring them down. "This is bigger than one case," Lozano told Dean during a meeting in March. "What you've uncovered is a systematic corruption. I'm bringing in the FBI." "The FBI? Wire fraud, conspiracy, RICO, potentially if we can show a pattern of illegal enterprise. Chester Herring has been running this operation across state lines. Some of those families he destroyed moved out of state. That makes it federal." Dean felt a grim satisfaction. Chester had wanted to play hardball. Now he was going to face the full weight of federal investigation. But Chester wasn't going down without a fight. In early April, Dean's business was hit with a surprise tax audit. The IRS had received an anonymous tip that he'd been underreporting income. It was obviously Chester's doing, another attempt to apply pressure, to drain resources, to make Dean give up. Dean cooperated fully with the audit, turning over every document, every receipt, every record. Because he'd always been meticulous about his books, knowing that someone would eventually try to use his finances against him. The audit found nothing. The IRS agent apologized for the inconvenience. Chester sent more letters, filed more motions, tried to delay the criminal trial. But Judge Horn wasn't having it. The trial date stood firm. During this time, Rob Tompkins continued his investigation. He documented dozens of meetings between Chester, Delaney, and Annette Horton. He traced payments through shell companies and offshore accounts. He built a financial map of corruption that spanned 5 years and involved over 30 cases. The families Dean had contacted became a support network. They met regularly, sharing their stories, preparing to testify. Oscar Brown, who hadn't seen his sons in years, broke down during one meeting. "I thought I was alone," he said. "I thought it was just me, that I'd done something wrong. But hearing all your stories, we were all targeted. All of us were just regular people trying to raise our kids." "That's exactly who they target," Lisa Kuhn explained. "Working-class families without resources to fight back. Families who can't afford expensive lawyers or private investigators. They're predators." "Not anymore," Ramona Chapman said firmly. "Now we fight back." Emma adjusted to the new normal surprisingly well. Her room had been finally cleared by police forensics, and Dean had completely rebuilt it. Knew everything, making sure no trace of Marcy's surveillance remained. Emma decorated it herself, hanging drawings she'd made at school. She never asked about her grandmother. It was like she'd simply erased Marcy from her life, the way children sometimes could. In late April, Jennifer received a call from her mother. It was the first contact since the hearing. "Hello." Jennifer answered warily. "Jennifer." Marcy's voice was strained. "I need to talk to you. About dropping the charges." "Absolutely not. Please. The trial is going to destroy me. My lawyer says I could face years in prison. All I was trying to do was protect Emma. You were trying to take her away from us. You broke into our home. You spied on our daughter. You manufactured evidence. Jennifer's voice was ice. You did this to yourself, Mom. I'm your mother. You stopped being my mother the day you tried to take my child. Jennifer hung up. She was shaking. Dean pulled her close, letting her cry against his shoulder. I never thought it would come to this, she whispered. Growing up, she was strict, but I thought she loved me. I thought she wanted what was best for me. Some people can't accept that their children make choices they don't approve of. They'd rather destroy than accept. Is that what happened to you? In foster care? Dean nodded. Some of the foster parents were just in it for the money. But a few, they genuinely wanted to help at first. But when I didn't fit their idea of the perfect, grateful kid, when I had my own personality and opinions, they gave up on me. Some people don't want to love you as you are. They want to remake you into who they think you should be. That's exactly what Mom's been trying to do to you. Remake you into her idea of a son-in-law. Yeah, except I'm not interested in being remade. The criminal trial began on May 15th. The courthouse was packed. Word had spread about the case, and local media was covering it extensively. A woman arrested for spying on her own granddaughter made for sensational headlines. Marcy Gillespie sat at the defense table, wearing a conservative suit, her hair perfectly styled. She looked like someone's elegant grandmother, not a felon facing serious charges. Chester Herring was in his element, confident and smooth. His opening statement painted Marcy as a concerned grandmother who'd made mistakes out of love. Ladies and gentlemen of a jury, Chester began, you're going to hear a lot of technical talk about surveillance and privacy laws. But at its heart, this case is about a grandmother who feared for her granddaughter's safety. Yes, Mrs. Gillespie made errors in judgment. Yes, she crossed legal boundaries. But her motive was pure, to protect a child she loves. Tim Lozano's opening was more direct. The defendant installed 6 hidden cameras in a 7-year-old girl's bedroom. She recorded that child changing clothes, sleeping, playing. She did this not out of concern, but out of a desire to gather evidence for a custody battle. This wasn't love. This was manipulation and abuse. The prosecution's case was methodical. They brought in Detective Weeks to testify about the cameras, about the recording equipment found in Marcy's home. They brought in technical experts to explain how the surveillance system worked. Then they called Dean to the stand. Chester Herring cross-examined him aggressively, trying to paint him as an angry man with a criminal past, someone who'd given Marcy legitimate reasons for concern. But Dean had prepared for this. He answered every question calmly, factually, never taking the bait. Mr. Copeland, Chester said, his voice dripping with contempt, isn't it true that you have a sealed juvenile record? Yes, and that record involves theft. I stole food when I was 14 because I was starving. The foster family wasn't feeding me properly, or so you claim. It's documented in the case file. Social services removed me from that home 3 weeks later because of the neglect. Chester shifted tactics. You've had financial difficulties, haven't you? Late payments, maxed out credit cards. I've had the normal financial pressures of running a small business and raising a family. But we've never missed a payment on Emma's essentials. Her school, her health care, her needs always come first. Yet you couldn't afford to send her to private school, could you? Or provide her with the advantages my client could provide. Dean felt anger rising, but kept his voice level. Emma goes to an excellent public school. She's happy and thriving. Not everything is about money, Mr. Herring, says the man who married into my client's family. Objection. Lozano was on his feet. Counsel is badgering the witness. Sustained, Judge Horn said. Mr. Herring, get to your point or move on. Chester tried a few more angles, but Dean didn't crack. Finally, frustrated, Chester sat down. Jennifer's testimony was even more powerful. She spoke about the years of criticism from her mother, the constant undermining, the way Marcy had tried to control every aspect of their lives. Did your mother ever express concerns about Emma's safety directly to you? Lozano asked. Never. Not once. She criticized Dean constantly, but she never said she thought Emma was in danger. If she genuinely believed that, she would have called Child Protective Services or the police or talked to me. But she didn't, because this wasn't about Emma's safety. It was about her not approving of my husband. When it came time for the defense, Chester called Julius Delaney to the stand. Dr. Delaney, Chester began, you reviewed the documentation in this case. Based on your professional opinion, did Mrs. Gillespie have legitimate concerns about her granddaughter's welfare? Yes, absolutely. Mr. Copeland's background shows a pattern of instability. His juvenile record, his financial problems, his lack of family support system. These are all risk factors. So in your professional opinion, Mrs. Gillespie's actions, while legally questionable, were motivated by genuine concern. Yes, I believe she was trying to document a dangerous situation in order to protect her granddaughter. Tim Lozano stood for cross-examination. Dr. Delaney, have you ever actually met Emma Copeland? No, but I reviewed extensive documentation. Have you observed the Copeland family interacting? No, but based on the documentation, have you spoken with Emma's teachers, her pediatrician, her friends' parents, anyone who actually knows this family? I relied on the documentation provided by Mrs. Gillespie and Mr. Herring. Documentation that was gathered through illegal surveillance. Lozano picked up a folder. Dr. Delaney, how many times have you testified in cases where Chester Herring was the attorney? Delaney hesitated. I'm not sure of the exact number. Let me help you. 43 times. And in all 43 cases, your testimony supported Mr. Herring's client. Every single time. That's because I provide honest professional opinions. Or because Mr. Herring pays you very well for those opinions. Lozano pulled out financial records. You've received over $600,000 from Mr. Herring and his clients over the past 5 years. Isn't that correct? Chester jumped up. Objection. Relevance. Goes to witness credibility, Your Honor, Lozano said. I'll allow it. Answer the question, Dr. Delaney. Delaney shifted uncomfortably. Expert witnesses are paid for their time. Yes or no? Have you received over $600,000 from cases where Chester Herring was the attorney? Yes, but no further questions. The prosecution rested. Chester called a few more witnesses. Neighbors who claimed to have heard arguments from the Copeland house. A teacher who said Dean had once raised his voice at a parent-teacher conference. But none of it was damning, and all of it was easily explained. Then came the final witnesses. Annette Horton, the court-appointed social worker. Chester had her testify that she'd reviewed the Copeland case and had concerns about the family environment. Her testimony was professional and measured, exactly the kind of thing that would carry weight with a jury. But Tim Lozano had been waiting for this moment. Ms. Horton, he began his cross-examination. You were assigned to evaluate the Copeland family, correct? Yes, but you never actually visited their home, did you? There wasn't time before the trial. No time in 3 months? Or did Mr. Herring ask you not to visit? Objection. Chester was on his feet. Withdrawn. Lozano pulled out Tompkins' photos. Ms. Horton, do you recognize this photo? Annette went pale. I don't. This is you meeting with Mr. Herring and Dr. Delaney at the Grand Hotel Bar on February 14th. Do you remember that meeting? I meet with attorneys all the time. Do you remember discussing payment for your report in this case? Objection. Chester's voice was sharp. Your Honor, where is this going? Lozano turned to the judge. Your Honor, I have audio recording of this meeting. I'd like to play it for the jury. The courtroom erupted. Chester demanded a sidebar. Judge Horn called both attorneys to his bench, along with the court reporter. Dean couldn't hear what was being said, but he could see Chester's face turning red, could see him gesturing angrily. Lozano remained calm, presenting documents. Finally, Judge Horn returned to his seat. The recording will be admitted as evidence. Your Honor, this is illegally obtained, Chester began. The recording was made in a public place where there was no reasonable expectation of privacy. I've reviewed the relevant case law. The recording is admissible. Horn looked at the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you're about to hear an audio recording of a conversation between the witness and the defense attorney. Please listen carefully. Lozano played the recording. The courtroom was silent except for the voices. Herring, Annette, we need you on the Gillespie case. Delaney, just base it on our documentation. Herring, $20,000. Same as always. Cash. Annette, send me the case file. The jury's faces showed shock, disgust, disbelief. Marcy looked like she wanted to disappear. Chester Herring sat frozen, his carefully constructed case crumbling around him. Miss Horton, Lozano continued quietly. That's you agreeing to write a biased report for payment, isn't it? Annette's lawyer, she brought her own counsel to the trial, stood up. My client invokes her Fifth Amendment right against self-incrimination and declines to answer. No further questions. Chester tried to salvage the situation in his closing argument, arguing that even if some of his witnesses were compromised, Marcy's concerns had been legitimate. But the damage was done. Tim Lozano's closing was devastating. Ladies and gentlemen, you've seen the evidence. This wasn't a concerned grandmother. This was a calculated campaign to destroy a family. And when the father discovered the illegal surveillance, the conspiracy expanded to include false testimony, bribed witnesses, and manufactured evidence. The defendant isn't a victim here. She's the architect of a cruel, illegal scheme. The jury deliberated for 3 hours. When they returned, the foreperson stood. In the case of Estate versus Marcy Gillespie, on the charge of illegal surveillance of a minor, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of identity theft, we find the defendant guilty. On the charge of conspiracy, we find the defendant guilty. Marcy collapsed in her chair. Chester caught her, whispering urgently in her ear. Judge Horn set sentencing for 2 weeks later. Mrs. Gillespie, you will remain free on bond until that time. However, I want to be clear. You're facing significant prison time. Use these 2 weeks to get your affairs in order. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed. Dean and Jennifer pushed through them without comment, but Tim Lozano stopped to make a statement. Today's verdict represents justice for the Copeland family and for all families who've been victimized by this corrupt network. The investigation is ongoing, and I expect additional charges to be filed against co-conspirators in the coming weeks. A reporter called out, "Are you referring to Chester Herring?" "I'm referring to anyone who participated in this conspiracy to defraud the court and destroy families for profit." Dean and Jennifer made it to their car. Once inside, Jennifer burst into tears. Not sad tears, but relieved ones. "It's over," she sobbed. "It's finally over." Dean held her, his own emotions threatening to overwhelm him. They'd won. Against all odds, against a corrupt system, against lawyers and money and power, they'd won. But he knew it wasn't completely over. Not yet, because Chester Herring was still out there. And men like him didn't accept defeat gracefully. The fallout from the trial was immediate and severe. The State Bar Association opened an investigation into Chester Herring the next day. The FBI followed with their own investigation into the conspiracy, looking at all the cases where he'd worked with Delaney and Horton. Julius Delaney lost his license to practice psychology pending a hearing. The state licensing board filed formal charges, and his liability insurance company dropped him. Annette Horton was arrested on charges of fraud and accepting bribes. Her testimony at Marcy's trial, combined with the recordings, gave prosecutors everything they needed. The 8 families Dean had contacted filed a joint civil lawsuit against Chester, Delaney, and Horton, seeking damages and custody reversals. Samuel Smith took the case pro bono, seeing it as an opportunity to right past wrongs. But Chester Herring remained defiant. 2 days after the verdict, he held a press conference outside his office. "I've dedicated my career to protecting children and families. The recent trial was a miscarriage of justice based on illegally obtained evidence and prosecutorial misconduct. I will be filing complaints with the Bar Association and pursuing all available remedies." It was a bold move, but Dean recognized it for what it was, desperation. Then, 3 days before Marcy's sentencing, Dean received an unexpected visitor at his workshop. Chester Herring walked in without knocking, his expensive suit looking out of place among the sawdust and tools. "We need to talk," Chester said. Dean set down his plane, wiping his hands on his jeans. "I don't think we do." "Don't be stupid, Copeland. You won your case. Congratulations. But you've made some powerful people very angry, and that has consequences. Is that a threat? It's a warning. Drop the civil lawsuit. Stop cooperating with the FBI. Let this end here. Or what?" Chester smiled coldly. I make sure Emma grows up knowing her father destroyed her grandmother's life. I'll make sure Jennifer has to choose between you and her mother. I'll make sure your business dries up because no one in this town wants to work with a man who sent a grandmother to prison. Dean walked slowly toward Chester, stopping just inches away. You need to leave. Now. I'm trying to help you. You're trying to save yourself. Because you know what's coming. The FBI investigation, the bar association, the civil suits. Your whole operation is collapsing, and you're terrified. Chester's mask slipped, revealing rage beneath. You have no idea who you're dealing with. I have friends in this state. Judges, politicians, people who can make your life very difficult. Then let them try. Dean opened the workshop door. Now get out of my shop before I call the police. Chester left, but his parting words echoed. This isn't over, Copeland. Not by a long shot. Dean immediately called Detective Weeks and Tim Lozano, reporting the attempted intimidation. Weeks came by that evening to take a statement. Chester's getting desperate, Weeks said. That's when people like him make mistakes. What kind of mistakes? The kind that give us more evidence. Keep your security cameras running. Document every contact. And Dean, be careful. Desperate men do desperate things. Marcy's sentencing arrived on a cloudy morning in June. The courtroom was packed again, with media, with the families Dean had brought together, with people who'd followed the case. Judge Horn reviewed the pre-sentencing reports, then looked at Marcy. Mrs. Gillespie, you have a chance to speak before sentencing. Do you wish to make a statement? Marcy stood, her hands shaking. She looked smaller than before, diminished. Your Honor, I made mistakes. I see that now. I was so afraid of losing my granddaughter that I did things I shouldn't have done. But everything I did came from a place of love. Love. Judge Horn's voice was sharp. Mrs. Gillespie, love doesn't involve installing cameras in a child's bedroom. Love doesn't involve manufacturing evidence and bribing witnesses. What you did was violate your granddaughter's privacy in the most intimate way possible. You traumatized a child for your own purposes. Marcy's lawyer tried to interject, but Horn continued. I've read the victim impact statements from Mr. and Mrs. Copeland. I've read Emma's statement, written in her own hand. She says she doesn't feel safe anymore, that she checked her room for cameras every night, that she's afraid to change clothes even in her own home. That's what your love accomplished. The judge opened his sentencing file. Mrs. Gillespie, you were sentenced to 5 years in state prison on the illegal surveillance charge, 3 years on the identity theft charge, and 3 years on the conspiracy charge to run concurrently. You will also pay restitution to the Copeland family in the amount of $75,000 to cover their legal fees and counseling costs. Marcy collapsed, sobbing. Chester Herring stood, requesting that she remain free pending appeal, but Horn denied the request. Bailiff, take Mrs. Gillespie into custody. Dean watched as they led Marcy away in handcuffs. He felt no satisfaction in seeing her broken, no joy in her punishment. Just a cold sense of justice finally being served. Outside the courthouse, reporters surrounded them again. This time, Dean stopped to speak. My family has been through hell because of Marcy Gillespie's actions. But it's important to understand that she wasn't acting alone. There's a network of corruption in family court. Lawyers, expert witnesses, social workers, who profit from destroying families. We're going to keep fighting until that entire system is exposed and reformed. A reporter called out, Are you referring to Chester Herring? I'm referring to anyone who uses the legal system to hurt children and families for profit. And yes, that includes Chester Herring. That evening, Dean, Jennifer, and Emma had a quiet dinner at home. Emma seemed lighter, like a weight had been lifted. Is Grandma Marcy gone forever? She asked. She's going to be away for a long time, Dean said carefully. How do you feel about that? Emma considered. I feel sad that she made bad choices, but I also feel safer. That's okay. It's okay to have complicated feelings. After Emma went to bed, Dean and Jennifer sat on the back porch again, in their familiar spot. 5 years, Jennifer said quietly. My mother is going to prison for 5 years. Are you okay? I don't know. Part of me is relieved. Part of me is devastated. She's my mother, Dean. Even after everything she did, she's still my mother. Dean took her hand. You're allowed to grieve for the mother you thought you had, even while recognizing the reality of who she was. When did you get so wise? Foster care taught me that people are complicated. Some of my foster parents were terrible people who did kind things sometimes. Some are good people who made terrible choices. Humans are messy. Do you think she'll ever understand what she did wrong? I don't know. Some people never do. They sat in silence, watching fireflies emerge in the darkness. The worst was over, but Dean knew challenges remained. The civil lawsuit against Chester's network would take years. The FBI investigation would drag on. Emma would need therapy to work through the trauma, but they would face it together as a family. 2 weeks later, Dean received word that the State Bar Association had filed formal charges against Chester Herring. He was facing disbarment for conspiracy, witness tampering, and fraud upon the court. His trial was set for September. Dean planned to be there, to watch Chester face the same system he'd manipulated for years. To see him lose everything he'd built on the backs of broken families. But more importantly, Dean planned to testify. To tell his story, to share what he'd learned about Chester's network, to help ensure that no other family would suffer what his family had suffered. Because that was the real victory, not just protecting his own family, but helping protect all the families that would come after. September arrived with cooler weather and changing leaves. Chester Herring's hearing before the State Bar Association was scheduled for September 15th, exactly 4 months after Marcy's trial. In that time, the FBI investigation had uncovered even more damaging evidence. Financial records showed Chester had received over $2 million in fees from cases where he'd used Delaney and Horton's testimony. Bank records revealed payments to at least 6 other expert witnesses and social workers who provided favorable reports. It was a massive conspiracy, and Chester was at the center of it. The Bar Association hearing was held in a large conference room downtown, presided over by a 3-member panel of senior attorneys. Unlike a criminal trial, this was a professional disciplinary proceeding with different rules and standards. But the stakes were just as high. Chester faced permanent disbarment, which would end his career and his income stream. The Bar Association's prosecutor was a woman named Olivia Fowler, a former federal prosecutor who'd made her reputation taking down corrupt officials. She was methodical and thorough, walking the panel through years of evidence. Mr. Herring's pattern of conduct shows a deliberate, systematic abuse of the legal system, Fowler said in her opening statement. He identified vulnerable families, manufactured concerns about parental fitness, brought in paid witnesses to support those concerns, and profited handsomely from the resulting custody battles. This isn't incompetence or poor judgment. This is calculated fraud. Chester's lawyer tried to argue that his client had simply been zealous in representing his clients, but the evidence was overwhelming. Dean was called to testify on the second day. He walked the panel through his experience, the hidden cameras, the manufactured evidence, the conspiracy to take Emma. Mr. Copeland, Fowler asked, in your investigation of Mr. Herring's practices, what did you discover? I discovered a pattern. He targets working-class parents who don't have resources to fight back. He uses the same expert witnesses, the same social workers, the same playbook in every case. And he wins because the system assumes that lawyers and experts are acting in good faith. But Mr. Herring wasn't acting in good faith, was he? No, he was running a business. A corrupt, profitable business built on destroying families. Chester's lawyer cross-examined aggressively, trying to paint Dean as a vindictive ex-defendant who was trying to ruin Chester's reputation. But Dean didn't take the bait. I'm not trying to ruin his reputation, Dean said calmly. His actions did that. I'm just here to tell the truth about what he did to my family and to the other families we've documented. The panel called witness after witness. Oscar Brown, whose sons he hadn't seen in years. Ramona Chapman, who'd lost her daughter. 6 other parents whose lives had been destroyed by Chester's network. Then came the bombshell testimony. Julius Delaney, who'd been granted immunity in exchange for his cooperation with the FBI. Delaney walked the panel through the entire operation. How Chester had recruited him 10 years ago. How they developed their system. Chester would identify potential cases, Delaney would evaluate the families, and they'd coordinate testimony to support the desired outcome. Did you ever refuse a case that Mr. Herring brought to you? Fowler asked. No. The arrangement was that I would support whatever outcome Chester wanted. That's what I was paid for. Did you ever believe that the children in these cases were actually in danger? Delaney hesitated, then quietly said no. Most of the parents were good people dealing with normal life challenges. But Chester was very good at making normal problems sound dangerous. The panel members' faces showed disgust. Chester's defense fell apart. His lawyer tried to argue that Delaney was lying to save himself, but the financial records, the recordings, the testimony from multiple families, it all painted a consistent picture of systematic corruption. On September 18th, the panel announced their decision. Mr. Herring, the lead panelist, said, "You have brought shame to the legal profession. You have abused your position of trust to harm families and profit from their suffering. This panel unanimously votes to disbar you permanently from the practice of law in this state. Additionally, we are referring this matter to criminal prosecutors for potential charges of fraud, conspiracy, and witness tampering." Chester's face went white. Without his law license, he had nothing. His career was over, his reputation destroyed, and criminal charges loomed on the horizon. As they filed out of the hearing, Chester turned to look at Dean one last time. There was no anger in his eyes now, just defeat. Dean felt no triumph, only relief. Justice had been served. Finally. But the fight wasn't completely over. The civil lawsuit on behalf of the 8 families moved forward. With Chester disbarred and Delaney cooperating, settlement negotiations began. The insurance companies for Chester's firm wanted to avoid a trial that would expose even more corruption. In December, they reached a settlement for $1 million divided among the 8 families, with the largest portions going to those who had lost custody of their children. The settlement also included provisions for custody modifications, allowing parents to petition for renewed custody hearings. Oscar Brown was reunited with his sons in January. The grandparents who'd taken them, faced with the evidence of the corrupted process, agreed to shared custody. Oscar called Dean in tears after his first visit with his boys in 4 years. "I gotta hug them again," he sobbed. "I gotta tell them I love them and that I never stopped fighting for them. Thank you, Dean. Thank you for not giving up." Ramona Chapman regained custody of her daughter in February. The reunion was emotional and difficult. The girl was angry, confused, had been told lies about her mother for years. But they were together, and they could begin to heal. Not all the families had happy endings. Some of the children were too old, too damaged by the years of separation. Some of the parents had been destroyed by the custody battle and couldn't recover. But they all got justice, and they all got closure. And that mattered. Chester Herring was indicted on federal charges in March. The trial was scheduled for the fall. Dean planned to testify again, to make sure Chester faced the full consequences of his actions. Marcy Gillespie remained in prison, serving her sentence. She filed appeals, all of which were denied. Jennifer received occasional letters from her, full of self-pity and blame. Jennifer didn't respond. "Maybe someday, I'll be ready to forgive her," Jennifer told Dean one evening. "But not today. Maybe not for a long time. That's okay. Forgiveness isn't something you owe her. It's something you do for yourself when you're ready." Emma was thriving. The therapy helped her work through the trauma of discovering the cameras, of understanding that her grandmother had betrayed her trust. She was cautious now, more aware of boundaries and privacy. But she was also resilient, like her father. One afternoon, Dean found her in the workshop, watching him work on a custom dining table for a client. "Can you teach me?" she asked. "To build furniture?" "Yeah, like you do." Dean felt his chest swell with emotion. "I'd love to." They spent the next few hours together, Dean showing her how to measure, how to cut, how to sand. Emma's small hands were clumsy at first, but she was determined, focused. "Why do you like building things?" she asked. Dean thought about it. "Because when you build something with your hands, it's real. It's solid. Nobody can take it away from you or tell you it doesn't exist. And when you build something for someone else, you're giving them something that will last." "Like our family?" "Yeah, like our family." They worked together until sunset, Emma's laugh filling the workshop as she managed to create a small wooden box, rough but recognizable. "I made this," she said proudly, holding it up. "You did. All by yourself. Can I put my special things in it?" "That's exactly what it's for." That night, after Emma had gone to bed with her new treasure box on her nightstand, Dean and Jennifer sat on the back porch one more time. "We did it," Jennifer said. "We actually survived all of this. We did more than survive. We won. What happens now?" Dean looked out at the yard, at the house he'd built with his own hands, at the life they'd created together. "Now we live. We raise our daughter. We build our business. We help other families when we can. We live the life Marcy tried to take from us." "That sounds perfect." They sat in comfortable silence, listening to the crickets, watching the stars emerge. Dean thought about the journey that had brought him here, from foster care, to finally building his own family. He thought about Marcy's music box and the hole that had started everything. That hole had been meant to destroy them. Instead, it had revealed the truth. It had exposed corruption and brought justice. It had made Dean realize how strong he could be, how far he would go to protect the people he loved. He'd spent his life being underestimated, being told he wasn't good enough, wasn't smart enough, wasn't worthy enough. But he'd proven them all wrong. He'd survived. He'd fought. And he'd won. Dean Copeland, the boy from foster care who had nothing, now had everything that mattered. He had his family. He had his dignity. He had justice. And nobody could ever take that away. 4 years later, on Emma's 11th birthday, the doorbell rang. Dean answered it to find a package on the doorstep. No return address, just Emma's name on the label. His blood ran cold. He called Jennifer immediately, then Detective Weeks, who was still with the sheriff's department. "Don't open it," Weeks said. "I'm sending a bomb squad." They evacuated the house, waiting anxiously while technicians examined the package. After an hour, the lead technician emerged. "It's safe. No explosives, no hazardous materials. Just, you should see this." Dean and Jennifer approached carefully. Inside the package was a music box. Not the original, but a new one, beautifully crafted. And a letter. Dean opened the letter with shaking hands. It was from Marcy, written from prison. "Dear Emma, I know you won't remember me, and I understand why. What I did was wrong. I hurt you, I hurt your parents, and I hurt myself. I've had 4 years to think about that, to understand how my fear and pride destroyed everything. This music box is not like the other one. There are no holes, no cameras, no secrets. It's just a music box, made by a fellow inmate who crafts them as part of the prison workshop program. I bought it with money from my commissary account because I wanted to give you something for your birthday. Something that wasn't tainted by my mistakes. I don't expect forgiveness. I don't expect you to write back or visit or even think about me. I just wanted you to know that I'm sorry. Truly, deeply sorry. I hope you have a wonderful birthday, surrounded by people who love you the right way. Your grandmother, Marcy." Dean looked at Jennifer, waiting for her reaction. She was crying silently, reading the letter over and over. "What do you want to do?" he asked. "I don't know." She wiped her eyes. "Part of me wants to throw it away and never think about her again. But part of me, I don't know, Dean. She's my mother. And maybe after 4 years, she finally understands what she did." They showed the letter to Emma, letting her decide whether to keep the music box. Emma looked at it for a long time, then carefully wound it up. A soft melody played. "You are my sunshine." "It's pretty," Emma said, "but I think I'll keep it in the living room, not my bedroom." "That sounds like a good compromise," Dean said. They put the music box on a shelf in the living room, where it remained. Sometimes Emma would wind it, listening to the melody. Sometimes she'd ignore it for weeks. It was a reminder, not of Marcy's crimes, but of the journey their family had taken, of how they'd survived, how they'd fought back, how they'd won. Life went on. Dean's business flourished. Jennifer went back to school and became a social worker herself, specializing in helping families navigate the family court system. Emma grew into a smart, confident young woman who knew her own worth. And sometimes on quiet evenings, Dean would sit in his workshop and think about the day Emma found that first hole in the music box. The day that changed everything. He'd been terrified then, not knowing what they were facing, not sure if he was strong enough to protect his family. But he had been strong enough. He'd been smart enough, tough enough, determined enough. He'd been enough. And that was the real victory. Not just winning against Marcy and Chester, but proving to himself that he was worthy of the family he'd built, worthy of the life he'd created. Dean Copeland had started with nothing and ended with everything. And nobody, not Marcy Gillespie, not Chester Herring, not anyone, could ever take that away. The music box on the shelf played its melody, a reminder of battles fought and won, of a family that survived, of love that conquered even the darkest intentions. And in the workshop, surrounded by the wood and tools of his trade, Dean smiled. He'd built something that would last. He'd built a life worth fighting for. And he'd proven, once and for all, that where you come from doesn't define where you end up. What defines you is what you do when someone tries to take it all away. And Dean Copeland had done what he needed to do. He'd protected his family. He'd found justice. And he'd won. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.